Today on The Real Story, a federal investigation is underway into state government, a former top budget official at the center of it. And there's a lot to unwrap. This morning, Hartford Courant columnist Kevin Rennie will help us unravel this convoluted web. He's been on top of what's going on from the beginning, what he's hearing and seeing this morning. And Governor Lamont has vowed to root out any corruption in the face of this federal investigation, but it comes during a very important political year for him and for state lawmakers. What are the implications it could have on this election year? For that, we bring political science professor Gary Rose from Sacred Heart University. It's all today on The Real Story. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Jen Bernstein. You may have read about a federal investigation that's looming over state government. It centers around a man formerly in Governor Lamont's administration and his role in construction projects around the state. Here's a look at what we know so far. According to a federal grand jury subpoena dated October 20th, now obtained by Fox 61, the feds are looking into a former top budget official in Governor Lamont's administration, a man named Konstantinos Diamantis, and various construction projects he oversaw in his role, including the reconstruction of the State Pier in New London, as well as school construction projects and various hazardous materials abatement projects in the state. 8 days after the state received the federal subpoena, Lamont's office fired Diamantis as deputy secretary for the Office of Policy and Management, which is second in charge at the budget office. Diamantis was also placed on leave from his other job, overseeing school construction projects under the Department of Administrative Services. A letter from the state said it was, quote, pending the results of an investigation into your alleged misconduct. Governor Lamont's office has not elaborated on what the alleged misconduct was, but there are claims in towns and cities Diamantis pressured local officials to use certain contractors for state-financed projects. On the same day the federal subpoena was revealed at the beginning of February, Governor Lamont also released the findings of an independent report done by former U.S. Attorney Stanley Torti. Lamont had commissioned the report 2 weeks after he'd fired Diamantis. It looked into the hiring of Diamantis' daughter by now former Chief State's Attorney Richard Colangelo. The hiring called into question coming at the same time Colangelo was asking Diamantis for prosecutor pay raises in his office. The report questioned the integrity of the circumstances surrounding the hiring. Lamont putting Colangelo on blast.
I've got to do everything I can to keep people believing in the public trust. And this was, I think, an abuse of the public trust. I don't hire him, I don't fire him, but if I did, he'd be gone.
Lamont didn't have the power to fire Colangelo. The report was referred to the Criminal Justice Commission. While they were looking into his conduct, the commission announced he was retiring. In a letter, Colangelo stated he disagreed with Attorney Torti's report, denying any wrongdoing. Now, there are a lot of moving pieces with this. Right now, it's unclear what started the federal investigation into Diamantis and how deep it might go into state government. The governor's office says the administration has and will cooperate fully with the ongoing federal investigation. We did reach out to Diamantis' attorney, Norm Pattis, who denied his client did any wrongdoing. Well, this is just the surface here. If you've read some of the excellent investigative journalism that's happening at the CT Mirror and the Hartford Courant, for example, there's a whole lot more to this. So we want to bring on Kevin Rennie. Kevin is a political columnist for the Hartford Courant. He's had the column for almost 20 years, and previously he was a former member of the Connecticut House and Senate. Kevin has a vast network of sources in the state. Kevin, grateful to have you on The Real Story this morning.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course.
I appreciate it. It's nice to be back on Sunday morning.
It is. Welcome back. All right, so speaking of the Torti Report, you were actually named right in the beginning of it. You broke news of the questionable hiring of Diamantis' daughter in October, and it was actually your article that sparked the Torti Report. What were you hearing and seeing at the time?
Well, I had heard that there was sort of inexplicable hiring had been going on in the chief state's attorney's office. And someone mentioned to me that the chief state's attorney had a new executive assistant. And I know that those executive assistant jobs are much sought after because They're well paid, and they are outside the parameters of our state civil service merit system. And then when I looked a little more and found out the person who had gotten the job, his last name was Diamantis, I knew that there was probably something unusual involved, because Costantino Diamantis has been around state government a long time and is a bit as a long had a reputation as an operator, someone who knows how to move the levers of state government. And I knew he was in the state budget office, and it seemed to me that a new chief state's attorney would probably like to ingratiate himself, and one way to do that would be to hire Costas Diamantis' daughter. And that's what happened. And some of the events that followed were not in public view for a while.
Right, no, and a lot of this just coming into view now. First of all, we have this, listening to the piece that I wrote, we have the federal investigation, we have the Torti Report, which, again, Governor Lamont paid for Stan Torti, former U.S. attorney, to come in and do that investigation. They involve the same man, Diamantis, but how are these two connected?
So it's my understanding that there was some interest in among federal investigators on what was going on in the school construction and also the state demolition and hazardous abatement program. And I believe it became more active after that first column appeared about the chief state's attorney and Costa Diamantis and Diamantis' daughter. I do believe that law enforcement officials would have been alarmed that the chief state's attorney was in cahoots with the deputy budget director, Diamantis. And I think that the investigation picked up steam after that column appeared. You see from the subpoena that was served on the state that it came a couple of weeks after that first October 1st column ran in the Hartford Courant.
It did. All right, let's go to the issue.
So the federal investigators, as far as we can tell, are interested in the school construction grant program, and also in the state's demolition and hazardous material abatement program. So all of this was going on, and I was aware of Tolland, the Tolland schools, the town of Tolland, having a school construction program in early 2019 that had been granted a highly unusual waiver of competitive bidding.
So tell us about the process. Normally, there's contractors that bid for these projects that use taxpayer dollars, right?
Yes. So normally what happens is a community begins planning for a new school. It can be time consuming. It involves a building committee of volunteers and often town employees. And they undertake the serious job of determining what they need, what the design should likely be, and how much it's going to cost, and how much money they're going to get reimbursed from the state. It usually goes to a referendum after that. It's a long process. In this case, it was a very short process. And as I saw in the documents, that the town had inexplicably chosen as its contractor a company from Bristol, D'Amato Construction, that had never built a school. And it made no sense to me. And I studied years of meeting minutes and other documents, and it took weeks, but I finally received an extraordinary statement from the superintendent of schools in Tolland, who wrote to me that the Tolland officials were told by Mr. Diamantis that their project would face difficulties in financing and finishing in a timely manner if they did not hire D'Amato Construction and a company called Construction Advocacy Professionals, which we will hear a lot about over the next few months, I think. And it turned out that CAP, that construction oversight company, had also hired Mr. Diamantis' daughter, same daughter who had a job in the chief state's attorney's office, to perform duties that were never clear. And that was the connection, I think, that really exploded this scandal into full public view and made it look like something quite serious, and also in some ways a traditional quid pro quo public corruption.
That was possibly
Scandal.
the linchpin. Oh, there are also
Yes.
other towns and cities. I mean, Tallinn wasn't the only
Yes.
one that's coming forward. You and
No.
I were discussing this before.
Yes.
You were saying Groton, Bristol, they actually pushed back. Explain that to us.
They did. Well, in Bristol, for instance, there was I believe, a hazardous material abatement program. They put it out to bid like you're supposed to do to get competitive bids. Try to get the lowest price for the work you need done in order to benefit the taxpayer. And in Bristol, they had done that. And then suddenly they were being pressured by state officials, including Mr. Diamantis, it seems, to not give the contract to the lowest bidder, but to give it to some other favored company. And what we've learned in the meantime, by the way, Bristol rejected that, did the right thing. But what we've learned in the meantime is that one company called AAIS that does demolition and abatement work has gotten 85% of these contracts. And that's, under any measure, something is wrong. And someone should have said something a long time ago.
On that
because plenty of people had to see this happening.
On that point, right. I mean, the question is, who knew about this? Because this stuff doesn't just happen in a bubble. And just so everyone understands the structure here, we have Diamantis, who is the second in command at the budget office, right? You also have the deputy in the budget office, which is Melissa McCaw, and then
she's the head of the budget.
She's the head of the budget office, so she's number one. He was number two, and then you have obviously Governor Lamont's office, who oversees all of these agencies, and Lamont has said that he didn't know about any of the alleged misuse of funds or of any problems or complaints about Diamantis, although some people say that he was warned about it at some point, right? There's a
that was me.
Was that?
That was me.
Okay, so explain that, because he said that the first time he's heard about this was reading your column from an interview that I was listening to with him.
He does say that. His explanations have been confusing and contradictory. But there was a meeting in the summer of 2020 in his office with members of the Construction Trade Union Association. They had prepared a comprehensive memo about the issues they were having and that they wanted to discuss. The primary issue they had, if you read the 2.5-page concise memo, the primary issue was Konstantinos Diamantis. The governor said no, they never got to that. Some of the union officials say, oh no, we never got to that. But what they do agree on is they got to something called project labor agreements, which are agreements that guarantee union workers in state-funded projects. The governor said that's what they really wanted to talk about. Well, if you read the memo, one of the first paragraphs is all about those project labor agreements, and that paragraph is all about Mr. Diamantis and what an obstacle he was. There's nothing else in there about the PLAs except the only problem they were having was Diamantis. So it is simply not possible that the governor understands what he's saying, that if they were most concerned about PLAs, then they had warned him about Diamantis. It could not have happened any other way.
All right, so where is this going?
Everyone seems to agree that members of the governor's office had received that memo.
Where do you see this going? We know that the subpoena is dated in October. Where does that tell you about where the federal grand jury is in the process of the investigation?
Well, the grand jury's meeting. I believe that people who have an interest in all this are considering their options. And we're probably in the next, I don't know if they go on their own time, but it could be in the next month that we see some people, or at least one person, going into the federal courthouse, facing a magistrate and entering a guilty plea as the result of a plea agreement. Very, very early. Early agreements are the most effective ones for defendants. There are only so many plea agreements on the shelf, and if you don't get one early, you're not going to get one at all. And your chances of making a deal that may keep you out of jail diminish with each plea agreement that someone else gets. And this is really a matter of urgent strategy for people who are of interest to federal investigators. And so they need to start acting because the parts are moving on this.
All right, we know that Republicans last week called for a bipartisan committee to look into the alleged misuse of these school construction grants. Democratic leaders also appeared to be on board as well. So it's certainly getting a lot of attention, and it's something that sounds like we are going to be hearing a lot about. Kevin Rennie, good job on your work with the column, and certainly appreciate you coming on and talking about what you've heard with your column and the reporting you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and this story continues.
We will have you on again. Appreciate you joining us on The Real Story. Everyone check out his column in the Hartford Courant, as well as his website, Daily Ructions, to follow along. All right, coming up, we are going to bring on Sacred Heart University Professor Gary Rose. Will give us a look at what this could mean for the governor and lawmakers during this very important election year. We'll be right back.